What is going on, Comic Fam? It's your boy, the Bearded Comic Bro, and I am joined by comic creators Joey Esposito and Sean Von Gorman. Welcome to the show, my friends.
Thanks for having us.
So, man, Sean looks just hard right now with that sword. Like he's gonna cause some ruckus.
That's for home security.
I get it. You
He
got
likes
all
to be
those.
intimidating.
You got all those pretty pictures in the back. You got to protect them. So you both, I discovered you really through the wonderful comic, The Pedestrian, and I want to hop into all things that. But real quick before we do, have you always had a love for comics and been kind of drawn to comics, or is this a newer thing?
Yeah, comics has been with me my entire life. My parents read comics. I grew up reading comics, grew up collecting comics. So this was always just like the only direction that my life was going to take, I think.
Nice. What about you, Sean?
Yeah, same. Kind of gained awareness right in the boom of the early '90s
Okay.
popularity. So sort of, I think my earliest memories are probably like Death of Superman, Zero Hour. That kind of sweet spot of me really reading and rereading comics. And I don't know. I had always had an ability to draw and had always been interested in lots of different creative things that I was always trying to do several things at once, and nothing ever really worked out until I kind of just buckled down and gave art a year. At the end of that year, ended in Axel Lanza's office at Marvel Comics. So I figured we'd give it another year, and, and here we are.
Nice. So what you're I'm hearing from both of you is there's hope as a parent who's trying to get young kids to read that it might stick with them.
Absolutely.
Good.
Yeah. I think
Good, good.
like I was just talking with someone about this the other day about how it's like so hard to get kids to read, but it's only like in schools where they're making you read certain things. But if you put like if your kid is interested in football or whatever, and you give them like football books, they're gonna read it because they like the topic. But if they have to read the Scarlet Letter, it's like
Right.
a harder sell, you know? So I think like just I think that's where comics is so great is kids love comics and there's like beautiful artwork and it's just so easy to get them invested, you
Yeah,
know?
for
So
sure.
yes, there is hope. Don't
Yes.
despair.
So where was it for you then, Joey, of kind of wanting to take, okay, you enjoyed comics growing up, or like, okay, I want to kind of dip my toe into creating comics.
I had always been writing stories, and I used to, speaking to Sean's point about Death of Superman, I used to trace Dan Jurgens' artwork a lot, like just from my Superman comics. So there was a point where I was like, I'm going to draw comics, but I never had the discipline to really apply myself in that way. But writing was something that I always loved, and I used to write short stories, and eventually went to film school because I didn't know really how to break into comics necessarily. Like it just was so foreign to me. But at least like, Hollywood, I understood has a structure and you write this and then this gets made and blah blah blah. So I went to school for filmmaking, where I really focused on screenwriting. And then while I was in school, there was a course on graphic novels and creating comics that really kind of opened my eyes to, oh, all I have to do is just like make comics and I'm making comics. And that's sort of where the path kind of diverged from focusing on screenplays and things like that to really honing my comics craft and just living and breathing comics. And then eventually, once you start actually doing it and self-publishing and making mini comics, photocopying it at Kinko's or whatever, eventually you evolve your skills and you meet other creators and it just sort of grows from there. And that's how really basically Sean and I met, just a few years after like this commitment to I'm going to make comics.
Yeah. So was it the same for you? I know, Sean, you had talked about you were like, I'm going to devote a year to doing art. And then, like you said, you ended up in Axel Alonso's office, which is a good place to end up if you like comics. So where was it then of like, okay, continuing to focus your art and hone that for, crafting comics?
I had done a comic strip in college called Sock It To Me, which was about a it was like a 3-panel strip about a character based on myself and living with his roommate, who was a disembodied sock puppet. And they would go on adventures, and that was fun to do in college. And then after college, I had wanted to come back to the characters, so I had put together like a batch of 3-panel strips, and then this was around the time print on demand, online comic ordering had become a thing. So I'd seen the website for Kablam and seeing like the books that people were making and selling through the Kablam website. And there's always, there's a you have to be a little ballsy in comics when you can see what other people are doing and go, I can do that just as well or better. And this was one of those times where it's like I saw what they were putting on. I knew I could do better. So I cobbled together these strips I had, which kind of came out to like 3 stories. So I had like 3 shorts, and I had a couple of random one-off comics, and kind of figured out how to lay out a book and letter and ink and color to cover. And I put together a comic book. And after that, I said, you know what, let me make another comic book. That was really fun. Let me try and make a better comic book. So then I teamed up with a person I worked with who was a writer, and we came up with a concept that eventually became a book called The Secret Adventures of Houdini, which was a sort of live action, it was a sort of a action adventure take on the life of the real Harry Houdini. So it was, historical fiction, but like action adventure. And this book kind of started heading because we started doing conventions and different public stunts. Most famously, I was chained outside of Forbidden Planet in New York until we sold all the copies that they had of the book. And that was a wild day that Comics Press picked up. Bleeding Cool did a story about it. Different comics pros picked up the story and became a thing, and that's what led to that book getting published. And that's how I broke into comics.
So cool. I love it. I've done a lot of interviews. That's the first time I've heard that breaking.
Yeah, it was a fun day. I mean, we knew it was gonna be a trip immediately because we were sort of borrowing from what Harry Houdini would do. He would go into a town, he would do a big public stunt to advertise the show he was doing. So he'd go hang himself off of a building, or he'd go submerge himself underwater in a casket, all to promote he's doing a show that night. And the show's always sold out because everyone's talking about this. So we figured there's something to that because no one knows who we are. So let's do something that will give people like maybe just like a taste of what it was like to live in Houdini's time, where he would do these things that like kind of like seeing David Blaine and these big public things. And after that initial thing, which was like 8 hours in the rain in February in New York, we started doing straight jacket escapes at shows. And this is around the time Joey had put out a call for artists, and that's around about the time Joe and I initially met.
That's so cool. And gang, be careful. Watch out for them at Baltimore Comic Con. They're gonna walk a marathon or something. So
We should organize a 5K or whatever.
so
That has been pitched, and I think we should really look into that, like a charity 5K.
It seems like a low cost promotional event, right?
Right.
It's people walking.
Well, it's tricking 1,000 people into exercise. So what's easier than that?
right.
I know I need to be tricked into exercise, so I get it.
Same here. So you guys got together. So and where was this then? Let's hop into the pedestrian because that's where I discovered both of you through. Where did this idea originate, and how did you both come together of working on it?
So Joey and I had worked on a book called Pawn Shop a number of years ago. That was hailed as an indie darling. It was a successful Kickstarter where I think we were asking for something like $6,000 and it raised 10,000. this was a hit in local comic shops that, we were selling by hand to comic shops and selling out. And it was sort of a day in the life in New York from 4 different perspectives. And each chapter was the perspective of another character. And these stories sort of overlapped and intertwined in a way. It was very emotional, slice of life, like no action, no superheroics. And, years later, I had this idea for this little guy, and sort of based on the "Don't Walk" sign of like, what if you had a character like the Flash who doesn't actually have any powers? He's just in a costume and he's just trying to be helpful, but he can only walk extremely well. So I had a costume design, I had a name, I didn't have much more than that. I remembered how great Joey was at building these really rich characters, and we thought that the Pedestrian could be this linchpin into potentially these different little stories that would intertwine in this very rich world. And that's when I had tapped Joey and showed him what I had, and he, instantly inspired. And then the pandemic hit, and we didn't know what comic conventions would be anymore. We figured that was no longer a thing.
Mhm.
Comics industry was going to completely change. So we figured we would take this opportunity of this time we had to just really buckle down and work on this project, at our own time, breaking up by chapters, sort of like the old Marvel style of like chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, and work on what was essentially at the time a series of shorts that we would then envisioned of like putting on webtoons or online or something and figure out the money later. But working on it for a year in secret to just, the mission to be the make the best comic we can possibly make. And at the end of that year, we had maybe 10 shorts of what would become this series. And looking at it, we were like, this is actually pretty fucking good. I don't think we should give this away for free. We should pitch this around. And then we began this process of showing it to all the companies.
Everybody.
Yeah. Joey,
Literally
what
everybody.
was your initial reaction and thought as soon as when Sean pitched this idea to you? Were you like instantly like, yes, I have an idea, let's run with it? Or did you like,
No, it was the former for sure. I was like,
yeah,
this is fucking cool. I have some ideas. I'll get back to you. Um, and yeah, it's just, I mean, Sean and I worked together on Pawn Shop, as he mentioned.
yeah,
And there's some other stuff before the Pedestrian that we had tried to make happen. In fact, Laser Titans, which you see in the Pedestrian, was a former pitch that we put together that didn't work out. So we incorporated some of those designs and ideas into the Pedestrian as sort of this like fake TV show that the people within the world are aware of. And so when I saw the Pedestrian design, I immediately thought of something that related back to my hometown where I grew up, which then inspired a lot of digging deep into what it was like growing up there, and all of that stuff sort of trickled into the characters that populate the world of the Pedestrian. So I would say it's evolved a lot since we first started, but I would say right away, it was like clear to me that we had a direction for this, and I knew how we were going to tie everyone in together and how he was going to be sort of the key figure, even though he never speaks a word and will never speak a word. And I just immediately thought it was very interesting and something that only Sean and I could really make together, because Sean's got this great sense of style and humor, and I'm pretty sentimental and like I really love strong character moments and just like getting into the head of someone just enduring their mundane lives, because we all sort of live that life. And that doesn't mean that we don't have profound thoughts or like deep emotions. And finding a way to combine all those things was really exciting and interesting. And I think that we managed to put something pretty cool together.
if someone hasn't read this comic yet, what's Pedestrian about? But before you answer, if you haven't read this comic yet and you're watching or listening, stop, go to your shop, get it. Actually, it probably sold out because it's so good and you guys are already missing out, but find it and then come back, watch this video. Now, if they didn't do that, what is it about?
We're gonna get real spoilery here. So the Pedestrian, broad strokes, it's about a street level costumed hero who never breaks the law to fight crime.
Mm.
On the surface, it's a quirky slice of life superhero story, but beneath the surface, there's an ancient war brewing linked to the secret history of street signs.
I like to say it's like Twin Peaks meets superheroes in a lot of ways. It's got this sort of sinister undercurrent that's happening, even while stuff on the surface is pretty weird and goofy and odd. But also it's funny and it's sweet, I hope. But also I think it can get and will get pretty scary. And I think in issue 2 you start to see a little bit more of that for sure.
Yeah, because at the time we're recording this, I've read issues 1 and 2. They've both been out. So, yeah, if you're reading issue 1, you're like, okay, this feels like a small town. There's a little bit of, um, the small town comic vibe, like you said, all the stuff you talked about. Then you get into issue 2, I'm like, oh, this is a lot more expansive of a universe than I was imagining with this storytelling. And it gets this kind of, like you said, there was a lot brewing underneath the surface that we as the reader were not aware of in issue 1. Maybe
Mhm.
people caught glimpses of it, but in issue 2, I'm like, oh wow, okay, we're in for a treat now.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I think
yeah.
sorry, Sean, go ahead.
Sorry, yeah, it's been really interesting to go from working on this in secret and developing this and brewing this for probably a little over 5 years at this point, and then to get the real time reactions of people reading this book on social media or you know really thoughtful reviews like on AIBT. Shout out to Chris Copeland, who's been really getting deep into this. Where his first review was like, "Yeah, this was really really good," and then the second review was like, I'll be honest, I was a little skeptical that they were going to deliver on these promises that they were going to deliver on, but they totally did. And I have a guy at my day job who's been picking up the book each time it's come out, and he'll pick it up, he'll read it, and then if there's like a quiet moment at the job, we'll sit down and we'll have like a long conversation about what he read and his questions about it, and like a non-spoilery thing, where it's really great to like get like the things people pick up on and what they aren't picking up on. There's some people who are like, "This is a great comedy," and some people are like, "Oh no, this is not a comedy. There's something really fucked up going to happen here," and I'm really anxious reading this book. And we're just living in between the
And I
two.
think they're both right.
Yeah.
And I think that is part of why the journey to getting this published was so arduous, because I do think it's not a comedy, it's not a superhero book, it's not a slice of life book. Like it's kind of everything that we love all rolled into one, and I understand that that's a difficult sell in a lot of ways. So I totally understand why we had such a hard time finding a publisher who was like going to get behind it 100%. But eventually we did, and Magma came around, and it's been great. And I'm so glad to get this out there because, like Sean said, we've been living it with it for a while, and so some things that don't feel like a surprise or a big reveal to me at this point are still like for someone coming into it fresh. Um, and that's been a lot of fun to get reactions to.
Yeah. How is that? I feel like as a creator, comics, maybe there are probably other areas of creativity too, but I feel like for you all, you've been working on this since the pandemic, 2020, it sounds like. And we're now towards the end of 2024 that a lot of us are experiencing this. So, how do you as a creative keep your juices flowing and going and all that jazz to then get to the point where it's like, now we're getting real, reaction because you've been, like you said, living with this for 4 years, creating and crafting it, that a lot of us now this is our real-time reactions to it.
Right.
Um,
It's tough. Um, it's like, I mean, I think getting into comics, you pretty quickly understand that it's a marathon and not a sprint. It's a long haul. I have other projects that have been gestating for even longer that I'm hoping to get out soon. But now my worry is like, but I wrote those so long ago before the Pedestrian, and the Pedestrian's so good. Like, are these as good? And like that's a whole thing. Um, but yeah, I think it's just at a certain point you just accept that it's no longer in your hands and it's out there, and you do the best that you can with it, you know?
Yeah.
And to speak to, where the inspiration and where the juices come from, I mean, Joe and I have always had a habit of incorporating, whatever energy is kind of around us at the time. Like when we made Pawn Shop, the book's a real bummer because we had both separately went on really rough life journeys at the time. Like I had lost my job, my marriage was falling apart, my grandfather died. So a lot of these emotions kind of got stuck in there. And working on something that began in the pandemic, a lot of that initial first few chapters are talking about social justice and isolation and the way communities get broken up by corporations, where like a big thing, a conscious choice was we thought it'd be really cool to have a costumed hero of color who doesn't jump to violence to solve problems. And how many times the perception of violence and what that does and what the cost of violence is.
Yeah.
And there is violence in the book, obviously, and there is a reason. It's not glamorized because in the first chapter we're exploring, who's this guy? This guy is so weird. Why is he trying so hard just to help people? And then in the second book, we sort of ask the question of like, are there forces in the world that are conspiring to ruin your day, and why? Who benefits from you having the worst day or your life getting ripped apart? Who knows? Maybe there's something out there that's not only trying to just ruin your life or just have you slowly suffer for an extended amount of time, because maybe that benefits them somehow. And then the third chapter, we're kind of going to expand on these ideas that maybe, yes, there is in fact someone who is trying to go out of their way to ruin your
I
day.
knew it.
And also in terms of, you know, the engine of like how we keep going as creators when it's lots of rejection or you're just creating things in a void or any of that stuff. I think the only answer is just make it about the work and the thing that you're making. Like if you're chasing adoration or even sales, I mean, sales would be nice, of course, and we need them to like make a living and to keep the book going. But ultimately, you have to be in it because there's no other option.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's no, we always say there's no plan B, like this has to work. And we worked other jobs and we do other freelance work, but like this is where the passion is. And I think I just don't know what else I would do to I don't, you know, it sounds pretentious to say like, oh, exercise my demons or whatever. And I don't think that's what it is, but I do feel like I want to creatively express myself in some way, and comics is the medium that I love more than anything, and that's the only thing that I feel like I'm confident enough to know that I can do.
Yeah.
You know, and so like that has to be your sort of motivating factor more than anything else, I think.
Yeah. So this has been it sounds like a long process of this book. How did it land up being at Magma Comics?
So we literally pitched it to every company that was looking at pitches. We either had connections. We had both had some friends at IDW, so I think IDW was the first place we had sent it to. Strong response. Like they actually responded, and we had a couple of meetings about it. So we knew based on that response, we kind of had something. So we figured that particular conversation didn't work out, but we continued to each publisher that existed, either had connections or me running around doing the legwork, meeting editors, and getting those doors to open to pitch. And as Joey mentioned, a lot of the responses we got were, we really love this, but we don't know how to position this in the market. So we had been making these little ash cans of a 6-page, like the first 6 pages essentially of the book, that we were selling for $10 a pop for years at shows. I would print out like 100, I'd sell 100, or give some to editors or other comic book creatives, building up the goodwill for this project and the awareness of this. There was a point at C2E2 a couple years ago where Joey and I are having dinner and kind of commiserating over why hasn't this been picked up yet, and sort of coming to the realization that the publisher that would publish this doesn't exist yet, because there's new publishers popping up all the time, and the one we need just hasn't decided to exist yet. And then at New York Comic Con last year, Bobby at Magma, who used to be at IDW, when we initially pitched Pedestrian, found me at my table, was telling us, we're doing this thing with Magma. We've got like our first slate figured out, but we're looking for more pitches. If I had anything, because he remembered that Pedestrian pitch. I said, well, the Pedestrian still exists. He goes, oh, please send that to me. I really like that. And we sent it to them. And, maybe a few months later of, very transparent, like checking in once in a while from Bobby, which never happens. Sometimes you either hear from a publisher maybe 6 months later, or never ever again. And Bobby would check in every couple of months. So like, hey guys, we're still looking, but here's where we are in the process. We've been coming back to it. And I don't know if this really did anything, but we figured we were going to do this either way, where we, leaving the question of how do we position this? How do we sell this? We've been getting this question a lot. So we figured, well, we know it sells because we've been selling it. So let's put together this collection of assets that we've had, and putting together, what we've done. We have made the animated trailer. We have contacted X amount of stores, and we already had retailers ready to order this book that didn't exist yet. So we knew we had something that probably a lot of projects don't have at this point. And then we sent that proposal to Magma on top of it. And a couple weeks later, we got a green light. And the thing they had said was, this was a pitch that they just couldn't forget about. They kept coming back to this. They had looked at maybe 1,000, 2,000 different projects, and Pedestrian is something that was stuck with them that they kept having to come back to.
Yeah. What's the creative process for this book? Because I feel like you both are so invested in this project. Like, is it a collaborative of, creating and scripting together, or is it all, now Joey kind of in your hands, and then Sean, once you get the script, you're going, or do you guys have a lot of like dialogue writing pieces and together and stuff?
This is definitely the most collaborative that I've ever been on a comic, which again is like part of why I love the medium, is because anything that you make together is going to be better than what you do by yourself. With this, we stay in our lanes in terms of like, I'm writing the documents and the scripts and Sean's drawing and all that stuff, but we share everything. We'll talk about everything. So if I write an outline for the next issue, Sean will look it over, we'll talk about it, and like, oh, I think maybe the scene should go here or whatever. Kind of like functioning as an editor in some ways before it gets to the actual editor. And the same thing with scripts. Like if Sean likes me to write full script, but with the knowledge that like we can tweak as necessary. So if he wants to do something that's a little bit different than how I scripted it in terms of the action, let's talk about it. That's cool. I think we both come into this with very little ego and just trying to make the best thing possible. So the best idea will always win. And I think working that way presents opportunities in story and character that you wouldn't get if it was just everyone kind of in their silo,
There's times there's even there'll be a disagreement over something, and we'll come into it, and whoever has the best idea will win, or compromise, or talk through, or maybe come up with something better than what we initially thought. Especially working on it as the shorts really kind of helped flesh us out and give us a episodic feel, where when we were crafting it as a webtoon vertical scroll type of comic, we weren't really restricted to the page formats. Like I would get, pages from Joey, and then if I felt the need for a significant embellishment, that there was really no reason to say no to that. So that we would just have what would be pages of content that would never get printed because we're seeing someone either walk in real time in some sort of faux animation, or that big reveal in issue 2, I think, was a much smaller thing initially in the original script, that we had the time to sort of expand on this and play with this, and became something very impactful that we had to, when we did get down to putting things together in the print book, we had to kind of make choices of like, I really like this, but we kind of need this for the plot. So we would kind of have to like reformat a couple of pages for like plot points, and we'd have to cut some of the embellishments, but some things like the villain reveal in issue 1 as a full splash was a conversation of, I really think we need, we've set up this guy. I think we really need to set the antithesis by, we're seeing this guy being active and helping. I think this would be a strong moment of, we're seeing the other guy.
Mhm.
Moment. And when I sent it to Matt Rosenberg, and he had commented, he said he loved it, and then he said he literally gasped at the villain reveal, which I took as high praise because I go way back with Rosenberg of like pre-writing comics. I think he's technically my first comic friend I've ever made back in his retail days, because he was there the day I chained myself up at Forbidden Planet.
But I think that's a great point about the transition that we made from working on this in sort of like this infinite canvas idea to a structured book. And I'm excited by the possibilities of like the vertical scroll format, but to me, there's nothing better than that, like that splash reveal on the page turn, or the double page spread in issue 2 with the signs of life. I think like having to make those choices and making the choices that we did improved the book tenfold, because I think the experience and the impact is much greater with the reveal of the bad guy in issue 1, coupled with Randy's sort of narration in that scene. I think does a lot to like establish this sort of undercurrent of dread that's happening under this scene. And in issue 2, I think like the impact of that moment, turning a page to a cosmic double page spread in any book is typically like pretty cool. But I think in our world, where hopefully for a lot of readers, that sort of twist was a little bit unexpected. And I think having it in that format versus just scrolling up on your phone, I think makes a big difference.
Yeah.
The response to that moment has been, I think, hitting in the way that I think we intended, because we're getting social media posts of people who dug the first one, picked up the second one because they were curious, and it's kind of like a slap in the face of like, I was not expecting this, and now whatever you want to do, I'm with you now, because you had that faith. It's not something that I think would have worked as well in the first issue, because the first is solid. There's a tone. We set up a lot of things. We introduce a lot of characters, and we have a complete story. And then 2, we kind of smashed the fishbowl in a big way of like, we thought we knew what this was, but we really don't, in a very Lynchian way.
Yeah.
But it's been described as Lynchian, but more forgiving. And I've always
we'll see if that maintains.
Like, challenge accepted.
have always loved, Lynch's work, because he doesn't want, he knows what it is, but he's not going to explain every single thing, because that's a more personal choice between the reader and the art. You're going to see things, and you're going to walk away from it in a certain way with one aspect of something, and someone's going to walk away with from another aspect of it, and then we now have this conversation of this. Well, what was that? I don't fucking know. This is what I think it was. What do you think it was? Well, no, it was this.
Yeah.
And we've been working on this for a very long time, so we have a very rich sort of creation myth and religion worked into this that, you know, if we have the opportunity to get to where we want to go, this is going to go into some wild places.
But it also, I think, like, for me, what's exciting is we're still grounding it in our characters. And, you know, as we go on, the cast would expand, the lore would expand or whatever. But I think it's really fun to see this example of just regular people who live in this world where this stuff is happening, but they still have bills to pay. They still have to like go to work and shit. You know, like their life doesn't revolve around all this stuff as much as it's important, you know, and telling the stories of those kinds of characters within a world with a broader context, I think is really kind of what's interesting about this world to me.
Yeah.
And that's a big part of the pedestrian, I think, from the initial initial seed of it, as you know, we live in a world, we're kind of stuck in certain patterns. Like you wake up every day, you walk down the street in a certain way, you go down this block, this block, this block. If you if you're tracking yourself on GPS and tracking, you're going to see that there's a little, you know, a little pattern that you're making here. And sometimes it's very rare that you actually go out of that pattern, or you take a left turn when you normally take a right turn. And sometimes you kind of get stuck there. And you know, why is that? And then whatever your life really is, or a lot of times what your passions are when you kind of get out of that pattern and get out of that path somehow, or something new has happened to you, which is hard to do because I got to get to this pattern. I got to get to work. I got to get home. I got to do this. There's all this stuff I got to do, and not enough time for the stuff I want to do.
Yeah. You just described my experience when I get into my car and it syncs up to my phone now. Every Wednesday morning, it's like it pulls up the directions to my comic shop, like because it knows that's where I'm going, or like,
Yeah.
oh, you're going this direction now. You're in the car to get to school, but it is to pick up your kids. I'm like, it is the same pattern though. Like, and so stuff recognizes it. And I don't even recognize that I'm in a pattern.
That's depressing.
It is.
I hate that when I like just am plugging in my phone to put on music or whatever. It's like, okay, it's 7 minutes to get to here. And it's like, fuck you. You don't know where I'm going. I'm not going there. I'm going somewhere right next to there, but I'm not going to that specific place. Yeah, I hate that. It's a very real thing, you know, and I think that is also kind of what this book is about, especially through the eyes of our characters who feel trapped in this city that they grew up in.
Yeah.
Everyone's kind of in their own pattern, and then this new element comes in and disrupts that pattern a little bit. And not only, you know, we talk about, you know, communities being broken apart, and what really is a community? It's a connection between you and your neighbor. Something has happened that has bonded you, and you know, you now have that connection. A lot of times you live in a city or town, you don't talk to a lot of people because we're living in a world where you say a couple of wrong words and that person is no longer your friend forever. And you have to be perceived as being on a very clear side of two different sides. And if you're not anywhere near that side, you're going to lose all your friends on that side.
Yep.
And just be alone forever. And it wasn't like that. There was a time where we could meet in the middle and work together. There are times during immense tragedies, like I mean, even during lockdown and COVID, there was a moment there where fundamentally we all experienced something
Mhm.
at the same time. We all experience a level of fear and anxiety, and I think there's not anyone who lived through that time who wouldn't benefit from therapy. And if we could all, as a race, as a people, could kind of acknowledge that, we could be having this conversation on the moon, because we came together in a way where we kind of got through something very fucking serious. And now, looking back on it, our opinion of what happened has varied now.
Right.
It has been politicized, and you know, reality isn't what it used to be.
Yep.
Just because someone says something, oh, that's reality. Another person says something, no, you're an idiot. There's no way that's real.
Right.
That's insane.
Yeah,
That we're
But now imagine that you are one of the few people who understands how the world works, like how the universe works, but you're still trapped in the same trappings that you've always been trapped in. And I would say that's like a tease for what's to come.
I think looking back on, I think in a couple of years we're gonna, Joey and I will work on other projects, maybe work on other things together. However this course runs, and if we're able to bring this to where this needs to go, I really think this is going to be looked on as a fundamental work of me and Joey. If not the best thing we ever do, it's going to be looked on as one of the defining pieces of what we do in comics, because of how much thought and effort and hustle we put into this. And just the connection we've been making with strangers. I was at Forbidden Planet the other day. There was like a 9-year-old boy, eye level with the first issue of the main cover of the first issue, and just staring at it of like, what is this? What is so weird? Dad, look at this. Like, what is the Pedestrian? What I don't understand. I have to read this. And he picks it up and he reads the entire thing. And as he's reading it, I lean over to the dad and goes, that's a good one. He goes, huh? Oh yeah, yeah. It's like that's my book. And the guy didn't know what to do with it. He was just kind of like, what? what's happening? Like, yeah, that's my book. I drew that. Oh. They didn't buy it. The kids
It's okay.
The
it
kid,
down.
the
Run
kid was
name
hooked. The
recognition.
kid was hooked, and then you're like, "It's my book." He's like, "No, I'm out."
But he
Oh, you? Nah, no, I'm good.
this is something that just pops up again sometime. Is like, oh, I remember that, or something that someone had to stop and read this, and that was really the response we were getting with the ash can. We was not a hard sell. We'd have a banner, something like this, with this image on it and just the book on the table, and people would come over like, what is this? A lot of people just going, what is this? And going like, this is gonna be so stupid. And then they open it up and like page 5, they're like, oh, this is genius.
That's still happening. If you look at reviews, I mean, we're very excited, so we're like reading reviews and comments and stuff. And there is a point where that needs to just like be separate from what you're doing. But a lot of reactions are like, I don't know, I picked this up because it looked funny and weird, and I wasn't expecting much, but wow, it's actually pretty thoughtful.
I mean,
You know,
you're describing what it was for me.
great.
I
I
somehow
love that.
missed did in previews for whatever reason. Was walking the shop. I was like, "What is this?" I instantly read it, loved it, put it out there. I had a friend who's out in California who's like, I passed up on it. He goes, I saw you liked it. I read it. He's like, I love it. And now he's sharing it. Like, so like it does happen. Like if we're just like, if even as in depth in the world of comics as I missed it and I was like, and now
Yeah.
I can't wait for it. I look for it every,
Thank you.
So
That's awesome. I mean, there's a lot of great shit out there, and it's very hard to cut through the noise. And I think we're doing the best that we can. Just trying to be outside the box a little bit in terms of the assets that we're creating, or even just the covers themselves, I think really pop against, some of the other things on the shelf,
I mean,
and that's not,
is something we curated for years.
yeah,
It was great having that time to, because if you reach out to an artist you admire, they're usually busy. But having the ability to go, we love you do this. There's no rush on this whenever you have a chance. And I think my favorite was Mike Papone's, where I just bugged him at shows a couple times because reaching out to people that not only we know are cool that we see at shows, that we could also have that community at a show of like, oh, you like this guy? He's here. He can sign this for you. But for Mike in particular, we're both kind of grumpy old men, and when we table together, we just kind of just fucking rip on some of the a holes you see at shows of like the people who are like kind of going out of their way to be a dick to you. Of Where it's like, who's this fucking loser? Oh, look at me, making fun of like the way they dress. And then when he said he agreed to do it, he just sent it to me. He just sent me a cover, like, oh, here's that cover you wanted. Like, holy, I was not expecting that email today.
So good.
Russell,
Well, I feel like I could talk to you both forever. But I want to respect your times. What else, or not what else, I guess. Yeah, no, what else is it all pedestrian right now, or do you got other things that are in the works that you wanna plug real quick?
Joey, tell me some stuff.
Yeah, so I wrote a couple of Sesame Street comics for Oni Press. Very different vibe than the Pedestrian, not so much existential dread.
Agree. I read Lens of Hand. It is very similar to Pedestrian. I've joked about this a number of times, but it's actually really true. It's Grover walking around, intersecting with different people's stories during the
That is
day
true.
at this way to help those people, and then the stories connect at the end. It is very similar to
I'm just
issue.
ripping myself off at this point. But so I did Sesame Street, and I will have some DC stuff that isn't announced yet, but should be soon. And then just a bunch, like just working on more creator owned pitches and pitching other stuff here and there and hoping it works out. But really, my hope is that I can just do the Pedestrian forever. Whether there's other stuff on top of that or it's just this, I would be happy.
DC's like, you want to do the Flash? No, he's too fast. I want him to walk.
I know he needs to slow down a little bit.
Way too fast for me. I only walk right about walking. Grover walking, pedestrian walking.
My heroes only walk.
Wouldn't that be a fun story of like the Flash can't run for a day and has to really embrace life for a day? That's something.
That's a Pedestrian team up.
There we go.
The Flash at BJ's on a Sunday in line for something.
Love it.
So good.
I'm working on a graphic novel for Z2 right now, written by a rapper about another rapper. That's sort of a. It's not a bio comic. It is a multiversal team up story between a rapper and his different personas. Cool Keith, and it's a lot of fun. And then I'm working, doing some stuff now for the other fellow who's writing it, who's also a rapper. I'm actually doing, speaking of Dan Jurgens earlier, I'm doing a Dan Jurgens tribute piece of like his Cyborg Superman, where he's got like all the wires and his arms open. I'm doing a tribute to that right now on the table. And this is brand new. I'm doing, I'm gonna have a pinup in the trade paperback of The Writer, which is going to be out later this year with Dark Horse Comics.
Nice.
The Berkowitz brothers had reached out and were very big fans of The Pedestrian and asked me to do some art, where there's even going to be a Pedestrian team up splash between Stan, their character, and The Pedestrian. So it's been really cool, like having these opportunities where like your character teams up with other indie characters. Joey and I are both going to be at Baltimore next week, and the guest of honor is a Ben England. So their yearbook, they do a yearbook every year, where artists at the show do a tribute piece based on the guest of honor that year. This year it's Ben England. So there's a Tick and Arthur team up with the Pedestrian, which is wild. So I like to say it's canon until the lawyers get involved.
So good. The 1 year I'm not 1 year. I haven't been in like 3 years, but that would be one time I'd love to be at Baltimore. But I'm excited for the writer pinup. I had the Berkowitz Bros on the show a month and a half ago or so. So
Sweet.
Listeners, viewers know that, so they should be looking out for that as well.
Awesome.
Well, where can people follow along with you both?
On the internet, on their phones. I'm on all the. I'm on Twitter at Von Gorman Art, on the Facebooks, Instagrams at Von Gorman Art, the TikToks. If there's an app,
You're there.
came out recently. I'm on it. I may not be as active on some of the others, but probably most active on Instagram and Twitter. I'm not calling it X Elon.
Nope, not gonna do it.
Nobody is. And similarly, I'm at Joey Esposito on most things. I'm not on Facebook, but everything else, I'm around.
Nice. Well, thank you both just for taking some time to talk about comics with me. This is a lot of fun, and
Anytime.
we'll have to do this again once more Pedestrian is out and we can dig even deeper into the world because I've got questions.
I would love to. That'd be a lot of fun. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. So gang, make sure if you are listening via the podcast or watching via the YouTubes, the links of all the stuff we talked about will be in the description of this video. And if you don't buy the Pedestrian, Sean's going to cut you. So with that being said, hopefully though, you can find some time to curl up, grab a book and nerd out. Peace.